My name is Michael Kosoy, and I'm a research biologist working for Center for Disease Control for more than 20 years. And you may be curious why I'm here in talking about Kabbalah. I'm also a student of Kabbalah for 20 years. And okay, maybe I can. Would be better? Okay. Okay. And
can you start again?
okay. Hello again. And I'm a research biologist working for CDC for more than 20 years. And because of my research, I work with very different systems, starting from viruses and up to elephants. But biology, it's not only about some specific elements, organisms. Something very special about life. It's not about just objects. It's about a relation between objects. Why the system, biological system, become living system. And it's not easy question. Entanglement, which is key word for all this conference, it's not very common in vocabulary of biologists. Not because it's not applicable. I would say it's too obvious for biologists. My Kabbalah teacher likes to say it's hidden obvious. His name is Samuel Vital, and he is coming from long lineage of Kabbalist, Sephardic Kabbalist, and he likes to tell that heart and kidney are different organs, but they belong to one body and works together. And experimental biologists can easily provide a lot of examples how they can interact through nervous system, hormones, metabolics, sharing the same viruses, the same bacteria. But Samuel meant something different. So he's telling that there are many organs, but one body. And he continues, there are many branches, but one tree, many pages, but one book. What he means is what we conceive as many, in fact, it's one. And we like to talk about holistic biology, that biological system, it's more than parts. And believe me, not all biologists like to talk about holistic biology. Not only because they're so narrow-minded people, but because they realize it's a lot of what we don't know about this system. We know something, but we cannot, it's big area what we cannot see, what we don't know yet. So when we try to model, to present holistic model, and we need to realize this is not complete picture. So basically we have pseudo unit. It doesn't mean that we cannot work with this unity, we cannot measure, but we need to acknowledge this, that we know only small portion of what we know yet. And it's what I want to tell during my presentation. I want to give you some examples just to give this feeling that we can see something, but we have huge area of what we cannot see, but my also purpose to show some ways how we can still work with unseen, with unknown. Let's start from beginning. In an organism level, it basically starts from a moment when one cell, it's like a protozoan-like spermatozoid, interacts with another cell, egg cell. And after that, it's like Big Bang started. And if you imagine like complex landscape, like mountain, hill, and with valleys, with groves, and if you drop balls, many balls, and they go taking different ways, trends, and they finally only can find some stable position where they stuck, let's say. And this is basically represent fate of each cell. And this model was proposed by British biologist Conrad Waddington almost 50 years ago. But now epigenetics, it's one of the most popular areas of genomics. And, but what I want to stress, it's real, but it's kind of virtual reality. We don't have such kind of structure within our organism. But we do have these systems that already entangled all our cells, all our organs in this landscape. They calculated that human body has 75 trillions of cells. And you can imagine it's whole universe from, and it's everything entangled in this landscape. But we are talking about our cells, and I can see here Emmanuel, who also worked a lot of this microbiomes. They calculated that in our body we have at least 10 times more bacteria, microbes, than our cells. Can you imagine about this? So if you have, at least conservative estimation, if you have 75 trillions of our cells, we have more than 700 microbial cells in our body. And we cannot see them. We can investigate only a small portion of them still. And mostly we concentrate only on those that cause some pathogenic infections. I mentioned that I work for CDC, and it's what we do in CDC. We only concentrate on very, very small portion of those whole world. The rest is just unseen. But it's not just exist in our body. It can leave our body. I don't want to scare you, but even now we share all the time viruses and bacteria. It's not dangerous because it's so small portion only can cause pathogenic effect, and it's only what we study. So we have huge areas that we cannot see, but it's what I want to say, this is very important part of us. Without this microbial community, we will be not us. We cannot live without those. Talking about genome, and you know that it was very, very popular area. It was billions of dollars were spent, and it was big success overall. But one of the big side effects was realizing that 90% of our genome material, they don't code any proteins. It's what scientists expected. And for many, it was big disappointment. They thought this threw away billions of dollars. And now, more and more realize that they call it junk DNA because it doesn't participate in production of proteins. So what is it just for none? It's like dark matter in genome. And now they realize more and more that sometimes they can learn about some functional role in translation, for example, identification of sites of translation. But overall, we still don't know yet what function of this. But we know, I mentioned epigenetic landscape, that whole genome creates this epigenetic landscape. So it's not really tangible, but it can be measured in some way. One of the common characteristics for all living systems, it's very high diversity, uniqueness of each organism, of each creature. And this, in fact, has caused a lot of criticism from physicists or from representative of exact sciences. They told it's biology, it's not real science, it's like history, it's because each object is so unique, you cannot really create any law. But actually, diversity is one of the very general laws of all biological systems. It's so diverse, variable, but it's very important, this level of variability. And we can study diversity. This is not what we can measure, right, by ruler or weight, but it's something what we can measure. And when we, for example, when we analyze genomes and we compare those and we find similarity, we are telling they close to each other, but it doesn't mean they closely physically. They can be, those organisms can be in very different parts of the world, but they still, we claim they close. So we have measurements, not physical space. We are talking about kind of biological space, which we cannot see, but we can measure. Or even talking not about geographical or spatial space. When we measure time, and I asked this question just before about time in biology, time, yes, we have astronomical time, but in biological system, time is kind of directedness. It's what functionalness, specific transformation of one form to another, how we can measure time, and how they interact each other. For example, synchronicity, how we can explain how migrating bird immediately changed direction. It was just no time for interaction between them. Or how ants create one super organism, what they call for ant colony. Or for another example, population in lemmings, they just suddenly can start to die. We cannot see any mechanisms how they can interact. Nevertheless, we're quite confident that there is some connectedness, otherwise how it can be, but we cannot see this. So I'm giving you just different examples, and one more example about environment. Everything what I mentioned, it's like whatever epigenetic landscape, for example, it's everything, all organs or tissues or cells, they entangled in this landscape. And all organisms entangled in environment. This is, everybody can understand, right? Ecologists, they study effect of climate change, of different physical characteristics of organisms. But those parameters really don't exist separately. We have whole system. We can, of course, study an effect of temperature, precipitation, but it's a whole system. And what I also want to stress, for each organism or species, this is space different. Just imagine, for example, this cartoon of the pond. And we have fish, ducks, frogs. And we consider they all live in one lake or pond. But truth is, they have completely different worlds. And this is an idea was proposed by Estonian biologist Jacob Joksküll. So he introduced the concept of Umwelt. And basically, Umwelt, it means in German, environment. But he argued that for each specific species, it should be kind of interpretation based on carrier of significance that create own word. We cannot see this word. We can see our word, and again, it's very subjective. And as example, he provided this tick. And he argued that tick has only 3 carriers of significance: specific odor that produced by mammals, specific temperature, specific for animal host, and some topography that. So this is host. It's how they perceive whole world. Okay. Also, we need to know that each organism creates own niche, change environment. Elena Knyazeva asked question, where is the end of body of spider sitting in the spider net? So how to measure, my question, how to measure unseen, unknown? And Kabbalah is a science of paradoxes. This is stories that everybody heard in different interpretation, because a lot of jokes, a lot of anecdotes, but I will tell from the word of biologists. One evolutionary biologist invited 2 colleagues to his seminar, and one started to present that evolution is basically multiplication, selection of some genes, and organisms just carriers of genes. And Professor told me, absolutely right. So second scientist took his turn and started to tell that evolution actually is based on the level of organisms, and it's selection of characteristics, and genes are just characteristic of organisms. So he told him, you're right too. So after the seminar, his postdoc came and told, you know, Professor, I'm confused how those scientists represented completely different views, basically mutually exclusive opinions, and you told to both of them they're right. And you know what he replied? He turned to me, you know, you're right too. So this is important point. It's not just conformism. This is acknowledgement that can be coexistence of two different opinions, plus it should be acknowledgement of paradox. And here, when we're talking about paradox, only way to solve to have additional direction. And we're talking about extra directions. It's the classical examples presented by Edwin Abbott in his book Flatland. Probably many of you read this. But I will give interpretation of Kabbalist Sarah Schneider. It's kind of biological object, the carrot. And so Flatland is basically two-dimensional world where inhabitant can see only two dimensions. So when the carrot passing through this world, they can see just appeared some orange circles, they change size, and suddenly they change for green circles, which represent green top of carrots, and it can be actually multiple circles. And we can see from three-dimensional world, but not from two-dimensional world. And this is glyph, probably many of you saw. This is Tree of Life, Etz Chaim, this system of Sefirot, so-called. But what is really it is, it's 10-dimensional system represented in two-dimensional world. We can imagine three-dimensional, but we can, if it's in time, it can be four-dimensional, but we cannot further go. And it's actually the same similar situation in string theory. If you're familiar, they talking about at least 10 dimensions that need to justify unified theory. But they, again, physicists can see only three. They can consider only three spatial dimensions. Nevertheless, they can use additional dimensions for their calculation. It can be productive. And here one more story. And it's a very old story from early Talmud. And simple story, I will even more simplify to make. So basically, 4 sages came to the land called Pardes. And those were famous sages. You can Google them, the real people, Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Elisha, Reb Akiva. But story is going, so Ben Azai looked and died. Ben Zoma looked and lost his mind. Elisha looked and lost his faith in union source. And only Reb Akiva came to this world and peacefully left this world. And this simple story caused a lot of interpretation during following millennia because they saw its different levels of reading text of Torah. Literal meanings, like stories, many people read, coded meaning, symbolic meaning, and sacred meaning. Schneer-Zalman phrased in this way: apparent realm of what is apparent, the hidden realm of what is apparent realm of what is hidden, and hidden realm of what is hidden. So basically not basically, but each biological object, in fact, any object around you, any system, any your condition can be seen in 4 different words, what they call alamot in Hebrew. To give you a hint, alam, it's logically close to alam, which means hidden. So basically, all these words represent a system of filters that hide some basic principle of organization. So Etzilut, Bria, Yetziratie, and Asiya, and very briefly we'll go through them. Asiatic word is basically word of separate biological units. It's how naturalists coming to a new area and taking animal, plant, and describing, measuring, because it's only one object. It's very clear. It's what we call reductionist, but it's very important word because we know for sure we take this object, we can measure this. It doesn't matter, glass or animal, we do kind of physical measurements. What is limit? But it's there is a limitation. As soon as this scientist turn back to this object, and he can come in months, he can come in moment, but it will be different, some difference. If it's animal, some cells already died during this short time. And so this object is changed, environment changed, biologists changed. So basically, as Ben Azai, scientists dying each moment of his investigation. It's erratic word, where we want to compare already, we're making already science, we try to name what it is this object, is a cat or a dog, and so we use some characteristics to compare those. Problem, and it's very important, if you don't know that, we need to take more individuals to compare them, we can use statistics. Danger is we're losing object. We have already some characteristic, for example, of cat, but where is cat itself? We also have, you can lose your mind, as Ben Zoma. Briatic work, where we have conception, we have already species. It's not just, we just name this object. We have already idea about biological species that specific for dogs, for example, and for some other. But we have already conception of evolution, of adaptation, of cellular organization. Danger here, not to forget that you not created this species. You can make interpretation of what it was created. It was a grave mistake of Alicia, who thought that the scientist who creates something like proposing new species is a creator. But he's not creator, he's at least co-creator. And absolute word is the highest words represent unity. And I will not talk too much about this. It's not really biology, not really science, but it's very important to be aware about this word. It's really a word where we have unity. But we cannot describe in words those. But it's also, this is a word where we have ethical questions, which is very important. It's part of, it's important for biologists, but it's not really biology, but it's this word, ethical questions, aesthetical questions. And so this is like vertical system of dimensions, and horizontal, it's represented by spheres on both sides of the tree. And this is actually a real picture of my teacher, Samuel Vital, and he's talking about cosmic accordion, when you like expanding or squeezing, and it's not only number of individuals, number of cells, it's higher diversity, low diversity. But also one important dimension is represented by central pillar of Tree of Life. And those points basically present purposeness, meaningness of biological function. And it's very, very tricky shaking point, I would say, for any biologist. We biologists don't like to talk about purpose, meaning. And Jack Haldane, who is one of the very famous biologists, he told that theology is like a mistress to biologists. He cannot live without her, but he's not unwilling to be seen with her in public. But without this acknowledgement of meaning, we lose this directedness. And so I'm short on time, I know that, but basically I want to make two conclusions. One of them, so this is represented like map for your orientation. Whatever question you take, for example, I ask, what is a gene? And you can look at different levels, but you need to be aware of what level you think and how you have kind of coordination. It's not conception, it's not, I don't propose any theory. This is just map that can allow me to have orientation. And if you're familiar with this map, the 3 pillars I mentioned, 4 words, I didn't mention parts of him, 10 Sefirot, 22 passes between This is actually exact number of Hebrew letters. And each of them elements has very specific meaning. You need to know how to read this map. It's even geographical map. You need to have some skills, right? Otherwise it's useless. But this is much more complex landscape and much more complicated maps. And this is really my last slide, because I need to give warnings that everything what I told, this is mapping is just maps. Map is not the territory. Map is not the territory. You need to learn territory. You need to have practice. You need to have expertise. You need to, if you're a biologist, you need to be biologist. But you can use maps for your orientation. It is very, very complex work. Thank you for your attention.